The UnitedHealthcare CEO murder suspect is due back in court for a pre-trial hearing over the potential death penalty. Earlier this week, prosecutors disputed a defense claim that he shouldn't face the death penalty because of a purported conflict of interest by Attorney General Pam Bondi. Now the defense is also expected to argue that the charges themselves don't meet the criteria for a death penalty case. ABC News' Olivia Rubin and legal contributor Bernardo Villalona are both here with more on that. Hi to you both. So, Olivia, why would Pam Bondi's 401k take the death penalty off the table here?
Well, that's the claim of Luigi Mangione's defense team, right? They say that Pam Bondi has a financial stake because right before she became the Attorney General, she worked for a lobbying firm that had UnitedHealthcare as one of its clients. She has a 401k at that lobbying firm. So they're saying there's a financial interest here. In their words, they're saying it's not a coincidence that she comes from this lobbying firm, and one of the first death penalties that she's seeking is in a case that involves potentially a former client. But prosecutors, as you know, we've talked about, are pushing back here, saying there really is no financial stake, that she has nothing to gain from a death penalty in this case. They say that she hasn't contributed to that 401k since her Senate confirmation hearing, and that she really has no financial ties here. So again, this is going to be something that the judge is going to weigh, but as you look at each side's arguments, they're really saying quite different things here. One saying this matters, the other saying it doesn't really.
And Bernardo, the defense is also expected to argue that the stalking charge isn't enough to collectively bring this up to a death penalty eligible case. Walk us through that argument and how prosecutors are going to push back on that.
Yes, so what the defense is claiming, and they actually brought in an expert, a criminal defense attorney that focuses on stalking cases. So what the defense is saying that, look, stalking in of itself is not a crime of violence. If it is not a crime of violence, then it cannot be a predicate for the death penalty. So if the defense is successful in arguing that stalking in and of itself is not a crime of violence, then the whole death penalty falls on its face.
And they need that stalking charge along with the murder charge, and also in order to be able to make it death penalty eligible.
Absolutely, but also you have to think that because of that stalking charge, because of a crossing interstate line, because of using the cell phone, and because of the tracking of Brian Thompson, that's what gets us into federal court. Because remember, there is a federal prosecution as well as a state prosecution. And for the feds to come in on a homicide case, there are a couple more requirements that are necessary for the feds to have jurisdiction over Luigi Mangione and being able to prosecute him in federal court.
How does this all affect the defense's strategy if the death penalty stays on the table or if it's eliminated here?
So the defense is trying to attack this prosecution in various ways. Of course, absolutely, when you're talking about the death penalty, this is the #1 attack that they need to attack. Just how they did in state court, where they were able to eliminate the murder in the first degree, which wiped out the life without the possibility of parole. Now the defense is trying to mitigate the exposure, in that if they get rid of the death penalty, then they already have a win in the sense of the exposure that Luigi Mangione is facing. Also, to determine that if the death penalty remains on the table, then they have to determine whether they're going to try the federal case first or whether they will try the state case first. So all of that is up in the air until there's a determination as to whether the death penalty will remain. I think in this case, the death penalty will remain, and it'll be up to the jury ultimately to determine whether the death penalty should apply.
All right, Olivia Rubin, Bernardo Villalona, thank you both.
Thank you.